At the time of making this, I heard Nate Tice mention that he may have Riley Leonard as his QB3 for this class, which I kind of thought was a bit out there, but after watching Leonard again and doing the charting and completing his eval, I can see where he's coming from. Hey y'all! For this week's video, we'll be doing an in-depth analysis of Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard. If you're new to these, my evals use a lot of different grading methods, which if you want more details on these, you can check out my eval on Cam Ward, which should be accessible with the link that should be on the screen now, as I have more details than that. Also, if you want to check out my grades and evals to quarterbacks from last year for reference, you can check them out with the link in the description. For any new viewers, I have evals and full scan reports out for Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, Kyle McCord, Dylan Gabriel, and Curtis Rourke, we can check out on my channel. Also, I'll be trying to cover a quarterback nearly every week leading up to the 2025 NFL Draft, so if you don't want to miss any of the other quarterbacks evals, be sure to subscribe. Also, sorry in advance if there's some sound of wind or gusts in the background. I have no idea why, since it's a pretty nice day by me, but the wind is absolutely wild today, so I'm not sure if that's going to get picked up on the sound or the video at all. But anyways, we're going to power through the elements and take a look at Leonard. Also, before we get started, as I mentioned in my previous videos, I'm a contributor for DLF or DynastyLeagueFootball.com. If you haven't used DLF or want to try to use their premium service, new users can use my discount code BACKSEAT99 in all caps to sign up for DLF Premium for just 99 cents for the first month. That will give you access to all the articles, rankings, tools, and more. Now, I've also mentioned this before, but I always want to make sure I do repeat this just to make it clear. That makes DLF Premium 99 cents for the first month. If you don't like it, you can cancel it within that first month and not be charged more than 99 cents. But if you do forget to cancel it after the first month, or you just want to continue having it and using it, it'll be $12.99 every month after the first month. Starting out with a look at his basic stats, his stats don't show a competent passer, but they do show an excellent rusher. While he completed 66.7% of his passes, he only threw for 2,861 yards, but he did at least throw for 21 touchdowns. He did have a fair number of interceptions with 8 in the season, but he was great on the ground with 906 yards rushing and 17 touchdowns on 184 rushes with just 2 fumbles. As for his charity games, I of course took his final 3 playoff games, and while this may be controversial, but instead of taking his Indiana game in the playoffs, I instead used his Georgia Tech game. I know Indiana statistically had a good defense, but I personally wasn't super sold on their defense, and I felt it was a bit inflated due to their schedule. Plus, I had a fair amount of respect for Georgia Tech's defense, which maybe it's a bit too much respect for them, but I felt like it was just a better defense to be able to judge. And also, Leonard did have to play from behind for a portion of that game, which I think also gives a better idea of how he plays under pressure in a game they're trailing. But to get back to the charity games, statistically he was good against Ohio State, okay against Penn State, pretty rough against Georgia, and okay against Georgia Tech. So, a bit of a mixed bag, but one thing that was always consistent was his rushing ability. He had at least 10 carries, 35 yards, and nearly a touchdown every single game, and managed to avoid a fumble in all those games. Also, Leonard doesn't take sacks very often, so his rushing attempts weren't inflated by that, and these are mostly true quarterback rushes. Also, there is a variety of these rushes, as you'll see in this charting, with a good mix of designed QB runs and scrambles. So Leonard is clearly a great rusher, has good size, and if you haven't watched him, has great arm strength as well. At the time of making this, I heard Nate Tice mention that he may have Riley Leonard as his QB3 for this class, which I kind of thought was a bit out there, but after watching Leonard again and doing the charting and completing his eval, I can see where he's coming from. That being said, there's still a lot of limitations to him reaching his ceiling, so let's take a look at some of those grades to see what may be holding him back. Starting with his footwork, it's a major work in progress, but he did do a better job keeping his feet flat in the pocket this year. Other than that though, it's really hard to find too many other positives. He's very inconsistent with his accuracy, and a lot of that does stem from his footwork. His footwork has been an issue his entire college career, and honestly the lack of improvement in his footwork the past few years is really disappointing. It makes me really concerned if we're ever going to see improvements that are needed. His base in the pocket is all over the place, and he still really struggles to consistently get his feet aligned with his target. Also, his footwork completely falls apart when he's pressured, often limiting how often he can cleanly get the ball out. On the move, he struggles to sync up his upper and lower body on throws, and he was able to get away with this in college thanks to his plus arm talent. However, I just have concerns how repeatable that will be in the NFL. Something that also worries me in the NFL is his drop back. It's pretty rough with some false steps, heel clicks, and lack of consistent rhythm. He will absolutely need to get this cleaned up to pass NFL team standards, and it's just really disappointing to see it still be so rough with the amount of experience that he has. So with major improvements needed in his footwork, Leonard earned just a D- for his footwork. Now while his footwork is raw, and him as a passer is raw in general, he does show some decent feel in the pocket. He knows when to step up and typically does a good job getting the ball out before pressure gets home. Also, he didn't have a high number of them due to his few number of pass attempts, but he did do a good job being willing to take throwaways this year and live another down. Also, while some rushing quarterbacks have a tendency to trail or circle out of pressure, Leonard typically does a good job keeping his momentum forward and knows how to use that athleticism to extend his time. That being said, while he can typically avoid pressure and extend his time, he can sometimes have it catch him by surprise or catch it at the last minute. This led to some of the issues of him holding on to the ball too long, so I'd like to not only see him speed up as a processor as a passer, but also to identify pressure closing in, since better athletes in the NFL will likely be able to close those gaps faster. Also, he can often get panicked too much from incoming pressure, as I mentioned before, which also leads to him ducking his head too quickly to burst from the pocket and lose track of his pass catchers. When he is trying to keep his eye on the pass catchers down the field, he really struggles to find passing windows, especially in the pocket, which led to a fair number of deflections at the line of scrimmage. Finally, while he can make moves in the pocket, he does so in a bi-directional method. So what I mean by that is he'll often move vertically either up or down in the pocket, but he doesn't make like those horizontal or sideways movements to truly properly maximize his protection. So with a bit of a mixed bag, but slightly more good than bad that he can work to build off of, Leonard earned a C+ for his pocket presence. Moving to his arm strength and release, Leonard has a very strong arm and can drive it down the field even if he doesn't have a good base to maximize his velocity and distance. He's capable of making any NFL throw and can get a team excited if they feel they can optimize his arm to pair with his legs. What may also give teams confidence in his development is his ability to throw out diverse arm angles. Throughout the whole season, he was consistently moving his arm around to try to fit throws in and could even do some backyard football-like throws at times. Now, one of the things that does make me nervous about his ability to become a reliable passer in the NFL is his wonky release. He has a tendency to flare the ball out to the side before throwing it, which really prolongs his motion despite having good arm strength. That release method also impacts his reliability in terms of accuracy and touch, and make it so that even though he can get the ball downfield, he sometimes will lack the precision to truly deliver on those deep throws. That prolonged motion also extends his time to throw, which could, again, lead to a lot of trouble in the NFL with much faster defenders. So with his great arm strength, he ended up earning a B+ for his arm strength. Due to his limitations and just the awkwardness of his release, to be perfectly honest, he ended up earning just a C+ for his release. Moving to his playmaking, ball security, and top start potential, get ready for a long rant since this is where things get really difficult to explain. In terms of having physical abilities to be a playmaker, Leonard has it all. But I've also started to factor in how consistently they can pull off those plays, since I believe that it doesn't really help a team if a quarterback can make an amazing 40, 50, 60-yard pass one play, but then struggle to make a completion for the next 10 pass plays. But as for Leonard as a starter, his passing work needs some work, as I've already mentioned before, but his rushing ability and toughness are really impressive. He has some serious wheels to outrun defenders, and combines that with really impressive vision to help maximize his rushes. Also has a good build to withstand hits, and has a bit of shiftiness to at least avoid head-on hits and minimize the damage. So very similar to Jalen Milroe, Leonard has the mold of a quarterback NFL teams want with his arm, build, and legs. Despite that ceiling, he also showed a better understanding of his limits this season. At Duke, he often tried to do too much, which led to more way-off throws. This season, he definitely had his moments, but typically he swallowed his ego and did what was best for the team. He also showed he was a team-first player by taking extra hits on the ground to pick up extra yards instead of going out of bounds, making throws through hard hits, and always pushing to go back into games even when he seemed injured. Also, it's just a simple gesture, but after a long postseason and losing in the national championship game, Riley Leonard could have absolutely decided not to follow through on his Senior Bowl invite and use that time to prepare for the Combine or his pro day. However, he not only still attended the Senior Bowl, but was a full participant in the practices and the game. That work ethic and willingness to follow through will really stand out to some teams and will likely be an argument of why he will pan out in his development. However, this is a lot of projection and a lot of hope based off of character. Maybe this is a hot take of mine, but I really don't care much about a quarterback's or, in general, player's character. I personally think it's an over-talked about point that's usually used more as another topic for people to talk about on shows just to argue about in the long off-season. We've seen lots of examples where players with good work ethics and character pan out, but also just as many or a lot that just don't pan out either. We've also seen the narrative of players' work ethics shift just based on how they played or with their improved performance, with players like Aaron Rodgers and Justin Herbert being some recent examples of this. But anyways, to get back to the point, Riley Leonard's evaluation will need to be based on projections since he's just so rough as a passer right now, as we'll see later on in his charting. He still struggles to throw at anticipation as well and typically waits for his pass catcher to be well past their break to throw the ball, which gives defenders extra time to establish themselves and make a play on the ball. He can throw a solid slant pass, but everything other than that is usually a bit of an adventure. There were so many throws where the pass catcher was open and Leonard had a clean pocket for routine completion, and he could still just barely get close to the target regardless of the distance. That's extremely frustrating for an offense and seemed to be frustrating for Notre Dame with the number of times they were willing to run the ball on 3rd and long and basically just concede that drive. When the team did need him to deliver on 3rd and long or were down, Leonard had trouble leading the offense in most cases and had trouble leading the team back. Ohio State showed how easy Leonard is to beat if you clog the middle to clog the passing lanes and force him to beat you from the pocket. And while he does do a decent job protecting the ball, a lot of that was due to limitations the offense put on him. When Leonard does throw and the pass is more on target, he often lacks the awareness of knowing where to place the ball to make it more catchable and protect the pass catcher. There was just so many times when he'd often fail to lead his pass catcher, force him to work their way back to the ball and lead to a loss of yards. So while it's exciting to think what he could be if he's able to put it together as a passer to be able to pair with his legs, there's just still so many deficits in his game to be a consistent playmaker and honestly just a baseline average quarterback passer that I'm just kind of burnt out with that thought after waiting for his progression these past 2 seasons. So due to having a lot of playmaking potential with his arms and legs, but lacking the consistency as a passer, Leonard ended up earning just a C+ for his playmaking. For his ball security, Leonard had an interception or fumble on 10 of his 587 combined passer rush attempts, which equals out to an interception or fumble on every 58.7 passer rush attempt, which equals out to a B- per my scale. But again, while that is a solid grade for someone who rushes as much as Leonard does, that could be worse if the offense didn't have such a tight leash on him. Finally, for his top star potential, due to having a great ceiling but lacking the consistency to believe he can reliably reach that ceiling, Leonard earned just a C-. So with so much talk about how inconsistent he is and how rough his accuracy is, let's finally take a look at his chart and see how bad it really got. If you're a visual follower, this is a really rough chart to look at. Nearly every area is red or yellow, and there is so much red and it's so bad that it's almost giving us a red middle finger, flipping us off in the middle. But starting at the bottom, he had a score of 80.77% in the short left, which sounds good, but this is actually not great compared to his peers from last year. 50% in the middle, which is bad, no matter how you look at it, and then 80% in the short right, which was good. The medium area is rough with no good areas in green, with 68.75% in the medium left, a decent 78.57% in the middle, and a bad 64.29% in the right. His intermediate areas is mostly bad, with a poor 41.67% intermediate left, 50% in the middle, and then a good 64.29% in the right. The deep area had very few passes to go off of, so it's fair to take this with a grain of salt, but he had a 50% score in the deep left on the one throw in that area, and a 0% score in the deep middle based on the single throw he had there. Now I will say, his deep throw accuracy is definitely lacking if you watch all his games, so even though this is just going off of a small sample for those areas, I don't think the final results or grade is too far off. But this is just a really rough showing for Leonard all around. We can see his limitations the offense puts on him with so many passes in the shorter areas of the field, and also we can see his reluctance to target the middle of the field, which makes sense with his struggles to find passing windows. So while I can understand wanting to get excited about Leonard and what could happen if he puts it together as a passer, it's just hard to look at this chart and confidently think, yeah, I think this guy can turn into an accurate passer in the NFL. For his off-platform passing, it's a bit more encouraging, but there are still some concerns I have. Overall, there's a lot more green than red in these in all the areas, which is a lot more encouraging than his on-platform passing. Starting from the bottom left, he had a good 83.33% score in the short left, a good 90% in the middle, and then a poor 66.67% in the right. For the medium, pass attempts started to really decrease, but he ended up with a poor 66.67% score in the medium left and right, but had a good 75% score in the middle. For the intermediate area, he only had a single throw to both the intermediate left and right, but did have a perfect 100% score in both sides. So the passing chart for his off-platform is more encouraging in terms of a color output, but I don't think it's too redeeming for him. His accuracy in the short areas was really good, but past 5 yards was still an adventure. Plus we just have a very limited sample in the medium intermediate to really feel comfortable about his ability to make those throws consistently. Now it is good to see he has the ability to make those throws, but we can kind of assume that since he has a good arm and a strong arm to be able to drive it to those areas. What I really want to know is if he can consistently do it, and I just don't think we can prove that even in a 4-game sample. But to try to make our scope a little bit more narrow, let's break down how he performed against Ohio State in the national championship. So part of the reason I wanted to use his Ohio State game for his individual game breakdown was because it was of course his final and biggest game this season, but also I was kind of surprised how well he played by his standards, despite Notre Dame playing from behind for most of the game. Now as the charting shows, it still wasn't great, but hey, this is a lot better than his full passing breakdown we saw earlier. Things do start rough in the short areas at 70% in the left and 50% in the middle, but then he had a good 83.33% in the short right. His medium areas do start out good with a good 75% score in the left and 100% score in the middle, albeit on just 3 total throws in those areas combined, and then a poor 50% score in the right, which was based on 5 throws or more than the other 2 areas combined. The intermediate area isn't great, but pretty good for him for whatever's that worth, with a 50% score in the intermediate left and a less than ideal 0% in the right. So again, for most quarterbacks this would be considered probably a poor performance, but for Leonard this is actually pretty good for as sad as that sounds. Now the problem is that a lot of those better throws came later in the game, so there is a very fair argument that Ohio State started to take their foot off the pedal and allowed some easier completions. Also, he looked really lost early in the game with the way they were clawing the passing lanes, so it still took him some time to adjust. However, being able to adjust and get his team nearly back into the game at least shows he can have some possible hope as a passer. For his off-platform passing, Ohio State did a pretty good job keeping to their game plan and keeping Leonard in the pocket, but Leonard really came ready to throw on the run. He had a fully green passing chart on the move, with most of the areas being at 100% and no area being less than 75%. Again, a lot of these areas were very close to the line of scrimmage, but seeing Leonard be able to create out of structure and against the defense giving him so many fits was really encouraging. Now, if we can get this type of form of Riley Leonard going forward, I'd be more than willing to buy into him again, since a team can try to scheme around his current issues that he has in the pocket. They also would have time to be able to develop him and hopefully get him to at least be an average pocket passer. But this type of performance on the move is really, again, encouraging and something that I do think that if there's any fans out there, this will be a good area to be able to point to as a sign of progression for him. For the totaled and supplemental data from his charted games, Leonard performed very well on the left and right sides of the field with a 71.05% score on the left and a 70.27% score on the right. He unfortunately had a very poor showing in the middle with a very bad 67.39%. Now the good thing is for his total accuracy score, there was very few attempts in the middle, so it didn't drag his score too far, and he ended up with a good 69.9% score in the total accuracy area. Which is probably making you go, wait, what? His accuracy and pass jar was garbage in the on-platform section. How'd this equal out to a good finish? Well, these total accuracy numbers are based on both quarterbacks on-platform and off-platform passing combined, which the number of off-platform passes can sometimes drop a quarterback's accuracy a bit, but with Leonard's accuracy actually being better on the move, it actually helped his case, similar to what we saw with Quinn Ewers. Also, with so few pass attempts, with him not even breaking 100 total pass attempts in this sample, that also made it so that those off-platform throws had even more beneficial impact for his total sample. So there is a bit of a lucky number effect in Leonard's favor here. I only have a combined areas. I don't have a separated on and off platform areas in terms of accuracy this year, just because as we can see, this section is already pretty clogged up as it is. But Leonard splits, if we base it off of on platform throws, will be 67.86% on the left side of the field, 59.38% in the middle, 70.83% on the right, and a total accuracy score of just 66.91%. So other than the right side of the field, that drastically drops a lot of those numbers and kind of shows a more of a clear picture of how he struggles as a passer. Now the good thing I did see from Leonard this year was less way off throws, with a score of just 10 total on platform and 1 off platform throw. As I mentioned before, he pushed things way too often at Duke, but he played much more in control at Notre Dame, which shows with those marks. He also did a pretty good job limiting sacks with his mobility, with just 6 total sacks in the sample games and no fumbles. Also, as I mentioned before, he can struggle to find passing windows, which showed with 6 passes being deflected despite not having too many pass attempts and also being willing to move out of the pocket. Also, for reference, he did have 2 pass interference calls. Also, despite not throwing too often, he did do a good job taking throwaways with 7 total in the 4 games. Also, he did have a fair number of interceptions with 3 total despite limited pass attempts, and also even had a dropped interception which could have bumped that up even higher. Not surprising, but he was very active as a rusher with 11 designed QB runs per game and 2.5 scrambles per game. What was really disappointing to see him struggle so much with was against blitzes and pressure despite his mobility. He ended up with just a 52.94% success rate against blitz and a 51.52% success rate against pressure. Both of those are below the 50th percentile, which is just really hard to do as a mobile quarterback. So with all the charting data together, Leonard ended up earning a B+ for his short throw accuracy and medium throw accuracy. Things got worse the further we got from the line of scrimmage, with a C+ for his intermediate throw accuracy and a D for his deep throw accuracy. His throw on the run ability was a bit of a saving grace for him, finishing at an A, and his success against pressure and blitzes ended up still being a B- due to both hanging around the 50% mark and not having one of them being way worse like some of the other quarterbacks who finished worse in that grade area. So for a summary of Leonard's strengths, after trying to do too much at Duke, he calmed down a lot at Notre Dame and was more willing to play within his limits. That's a hard adjustment for quarterbacks to make, but that shows he is coachable and is willing to swallow his ego for the betterment of the team. When he is letting it loose, he has great arm strength to drive the ball downfield. Also, he has fantastic mobility and speed, as well as the size to be able to survive hits. His toughness taking hits instead of going out of bounds, taking a hit while making a throw, and getting back into games after seemingly being injured is incredibly respectable and should really impress NFL teams. What impressed me personally was his pocket management skills. It's definitely not great, but he does have a decent feel in the pocket and has a foundation to build off of with some NFL coaching. Finally, while his accuracy in the pocket needs a lot of work, his accuracy on the move also will give teams some hope that he has a foundation to work off of as a passer. Now there is still a lot he needs to work on though to be close to an NFL starter. He needs to speed up his processing and be more decisive as a passer to get the ball out and not give the defense a chance to recover. He also needs to find a way to speed up his release and make it more efficient, as the flaring out really slows things down and makes things even easier for defenders. He also needs to find a way to be a much more consistent passer. Those flashes of arm talent are great to see, but they don't happen frequently enough, and NFL teams will likely get frustrated by that and want to move on if he doesn't improve. If he can improve his footwork, that will definitely help, but it's just so far behind right now that I have a hard time feeling confident he'll suddenly make an improvement in that area. Finally, all those issues culminate into struggles with his accuracy pass statistics, which may make teams question if quarterback is his best position in the NFL. So by taking the average of all his scores, Riley Leonard ended up earning a 2.46 out of 4, which puts him in my tier of needs improvement to contribute. I think that's a very fitting place for him to finish at, since despite the upside with his arm and legs, he is just so far behind as a passer that it's hard to trust him. Honestly, with his rushing and mobility ability, I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes the next Taysom Hill experiment for a team, but we'll see how teams view him. That may sound pessimistic, but again, this is a player I've been waiting on for the past 2 seasons to make any progress as a passer, and I just haven't seen them. As a Milwaukee Bucks fan, it's kind of how I feel with Giannis. I would love for Giannis to make free throws, but I've kind of come to expect that won't be the case. Unfortunately, I also don't expect Leonard to become a consistent passer at this point. Though Taysom Hill is probably the easiest comp for Leonard, I used Hill as Brendan Armstrong's comp last year, and I do try to avoid repeats if possible. So I instead have Leonard comp to Tim Tebow. Both are more rushers than passers and have good builds to be able to take on hits. Also, both are willing to swallow their egos to help a team win, which will really impress teams. Like Tebow, Leonard had better accuracy on the move when he gets the passing lanes cleared for him. Unfortunately, their accuracy in the pocket is really rough due to their wonky release and poor footwork. While they do have good arm strength, they usually aren't able to deliver on it due to poor mechanics. Also, both can struggle as processors and often resort to rushing when pressure is closing in instead of finding a target downfield. Similar to Tebow, I can see a team falling in love with Leonard during the interview process and the upside that he can bring as a rusher. I personally think he likely won't pan out in the NFL, but that won't stop a team from chasing their dreams and shooting high for upside. And that's all for Riley Leonard. Let me know what your thoughts are on the eval and on Leonard, since I think he could be a lot of people's sleeper quarterback thanks to his arm and rushing upside. As I mentioned before, I'll be working on a quarterback eval most of the weeks leading up to the draft, so to be sure you don't miss any of them, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the video as it helped the channel and the series grow thanks to you. And if you want just a written form of the eval, you can subscribe to my Substack, as I'll have the full written eval for each player out at the same time as the video. But thank you all, and see you all next time.